In a world that glittered with danger and beauty, there was a boy born beneath the silence of the night, a silence that would one day be replaced by the rhythmic pulse of drums and the shimmering echo of metal. His name was Tengen Uzui, and though his life would later dazzle with flash and color, it began in the shadow of duty and control. The Uzui clan was one of shinobi tradition, cold, disciplined, and merciless. They were a family that valued strength above compassion, results above emotion. From the moment Tengen could walk, he was no longer seen as a child, but as a weapon in training, sharpened for survival. The life of a shinobi was one of constant motion, but never of freedom. At the age of 8, Tengen had already mastered tools that could kill. He was taught not only to fight, but to suppress thought, to bury feeling deep within him. His father was a man without warmth, a figure who demanded obedience and saw individuality as weakness. For every child he raised, he demanded perfection, and failure was met not with correction, but with punishment. Of Tengen's 9 siblings, 7 would die before reaching adulthood. They were pitted against each other in brutal training, meant to cull weakness and breed survivors. Tengen was one of the 2 who lived, but what survived was not a boy. It was something harder, quieter, broken in unseen ways. He could still remember his father's voice, rough and sharp, commanding him to kill his own brother during one of the final tests. He had refused. That refusal, that spark of humanity, had nearly cost him his life. But it was in that moment that Tengen began to change. For the first time, he questioned the cycle of cruelty that defined his clan. Why must survival be the only truth? Why must strength mean silence? These thoughts, dangerous as they were, stayed with him long after he escaped the clutches of his family. When he finally fled, the night was still. Yet every step echoed like a drum in his chest. The wind carried no comfort, only the faint scent of steel and dust that clung to his past. Tengen wandered the land as a rogue shinobi, unsure of who he was meant to be. Without his clan's orders, there was no rhythm to his existence. But slowly, he began to notice the world in ways he never had before. The way the rain pattered differently on stone than on wood. The soft pulse of cicadas at dusk. The shifting melody of footsteps in an empty street. Sound became his salvation. He began to realize that life itself was music, chaotic, unpredictable, yet beautifully composed. The world wasn't silent. It was alive, humming in 1,000 tones that only the free could hear. And in that realization, Tengen found purpose. He would become a man who lived with flamboyance, with rhythm, with heart. If his clan had taught him to blend into the shadows, then he would live instead in color and motion, a man impossible to ignore. Years later, he would encounter the Demon Slayer course. At first, he didn't join out of loyalty or vengeance, but because their existence resonated with something deep within him. They fought not for power, but for the protection of others. They danced between life and death, and in that struggle, there was music. Tengen rose quickly among their ranks, his shinobi training giving him unmatched agility and awareness. But it wasn't his skill that defined him. It was the way he fought, flamboyant, vibrant, expressive. To others, Tengen seemed confident, almost arrogant. But beneath that sparkle was a man who refused to be controlled again. His laughter, his extravagant gestures, his obsession with beauty, they were all declarations of freedom. Every swing of his dual Nichiren blades was an act of rebellion against the silence of his childhood. Every explosion, every flash of sound and color was his way of shouting to the world that he was alive. And yet, even within his brightness, there was gentleness. He had taken 3 wives, Suma, Makio, and Hinatsuru, and unlike his father, he treated them not as possessions or tools, but as equals. Together, they formed a team that functioned like a perfect symphony, each moving in harmony, trusting one another completely. Tengen cared for them deeply, and though his pride often hid his worry, he would gladly die to protect them. Still, at night, when the noise faded and the moonlight fell quiet, he would sometimes hear echoes from the past, the sound of his siblings crying, the voice of his father, sharp as a blade. He had escaped the shadows, but they lingered in the edges of his memory, whispering that peace was never permanent. That was why he trained harder, fought louder, and lived more boldly than anyone else. He believed that life should be celebrated in all its fleeting beauty, that even in a world filled with demons and death, one could still choose joy. And so, under the vast sky that had once watched him run from pain, Tengen Uzui smiled, a man reborn through rhythm, shimmering like sound itself in the silence of night. As Tengen Uzui grew into his role within the Demon Slayer Corps, his flamboyant nature began to stand out in ways that were impossible to ignore. Where others approached their duty with solemn focus, Tengen moved through every mission like a performance. His movements were elegant yet fierce, each step landing with precision, each strike guided not just by sight, but by sound. He had developed a technique unlike any other, sound breathing, an art that allowed him to perceive battle as a form of music. Every heartbeat, every clash of metal, every breath of air carried rhythm and information. He listened not just with his ears, but with his entire being. In time, this technique became an extension of his soul. He wielded 2 massive Nichiren blades connected by a chain. Their clash creating deep metallic echoes that resonated through the battlefield. They were heavy, unwieldy to anyone else, but in Tengen's hands, they sang. When he fought, it was a dance, a display of controlled chaos and beauty, something closer to choreography than combat. His enemies never saw it coming. To them, it was as if the world itself had turned into a blur of sound and light. But beneath his bravado, there was purpose. Tengen was not a man who sought attention simply for ego. His flamboyance was his way of rejecting the coldness of his past. He had seen enough death without meaning. If he was going to risk his life, he would do it in a way that honored beauty, freedom, and joy. Even in battle, he refused to let despair take root. His laughter carried through smoke and blood, loud enough to remind his allies that life could still be celebrated, even in darkness. His wives, Suma, Makio, and Hinatsuru, shared that same spirit. Each had been trained as kunoichi, skilled and sharp in their own right. But around Tengen, they found something more than survival. They found purpose and partnership. To outsiders, the idea of 3 wives seemed boastful, perhaps even arrogant, but in truth, Tengen cherished them beyond words. He treated them not as subordinates, but as equals, trusting their instincts completely. Together, they moved like a single unit. Suma's intuition, Makio's courage, and Hinatsuru's calmness all balanced his wildness. They were his family, his harmony, the 3 notes that kept his rhythm steady. There were nights when they would return from a mission, bruised and tired, yet still laughing around the campfire. The flames would dance in their eyes as Tengen told exaggerated stories of their battles, embellishing every detail to make them laugh. It wasn't that he loved drama. It was that he wanted to create light in a world that too often drowned in darkness. His wives would roll their eyes, but they'd smile too, warmed by his energy. For Tengen, their laughter was the sweetest sound in existence. But even amidst his flamboyant life, danger never stopped lurking. The Demon Slayer Corps lived on the edge of tragedy, and even the strongest Hashira were never promised tomorrow. Tengen knew this all too well. His missions often took him deep into enemy territory, where even a moment's hesitation could mean death. Still, he carried his charm with him, because fear had no place in the rhythm he followed. When he first encountered lesser demons, his style was deemed unconventional. Many doubted that someone so loud, so flashy, could truly hold the title of Hashira. But every time he fought, he silenced his critics with action. His sound breathing allowed him to predict attacks before they happened, to break down an enemy's movement into rhythmic patterns, to find the weak beat in their tempo and strike precisely when it mattered most. His flamboyant flair wasn't a distraction. It was mastery, and behind that mastery, there was heart. Tengen wasn't just fighting to kill demons. He was fighting to protect his wives, his comrades, and the fleeting joy of human life. He knew better than anyone how fragile it all was. When you lived as a shinobi, your life was nothing more than a flicker, a shadow used and discarded. As a demon slayer, he wanted that flicker to shine. Bright, loud, impossible to ignore. There was a day, he once recalled, standing atop a mountain ridge after a brutal mission. The morning mist rolled through the valleys, cool against his skin. His blades rested at his sides, silent now after a long night of violence. For a moment, he simply listened to the soft rustle of the wind, to the fading cries of crows in the distance. It was then he realized that even after all of the bloodshed, the world's rhythm continued. It didn't mourn. It didn't stop. It simply moved forward. That was when he decided he too would always move forward, flamboyantly, beautifully, until the day his sound finally faded. His fame spread through the corps, not just for his skill, but for his character. New recruits admired him, though few understood the layers beneath his charisma. Some saw arrogance, others saw inspiration. But those who fought alongside him knew the truth. Tengen Uzui was a man who carried grief beneath his smile, pain beneath his laughter, and courage within every flamboyant word he spoke. And though he rarely mentioned it, he sometimes wondered about his surviving brother, the one who had remained loyal to their father. Swallowed by the same darkness, Tengen escaped. Somewhere deep inside, he hoped that his brother had found peace, even if in another life. It was a silent wish, one that echoed faintly between missions, like a distant note that never fully faded. For now, though, Tengen would keep shining. His path was one of sound and light, a melody that cut through the night, leading both himself and others toward something brighter. And as the sun began to rise over the Demon Slayer Corps' headquarters, Tengen Uzui smiled once more, his reflection glinting in the blades at his side. The rhythm of his life played on, strong, flamboyant, and beautifully alive. As dawn broke across the horizon, a pale warmth washed over the rooftops of the Demon Slayer Corps. Tengen Uzui stood at the edge of the courtyard, his shadow stretching long and dramatic against the rising light. The gentle hum of the morning wind carried the scent of cherry blossoms and steel polish, and for a brief moment he allowed himself to breathe in the quiet before another mission began. His hands rested on the hilts of his dual blades, their metal faintly resonating like tuning forks. The world around him was never truly silent, not for someone who could hear the pulse of existence itself. His thoughts lingered on the reports that had arrived from the west. Rumors whispered through the ranks of a strange disappearance within a bustling city of lights, a place hidden beneath the glow of pleasure and deception, the entertainment district. It was said that people had been vanishing without trace, entire households swallowed by the night. Ordinary humans assumed it was crime, corruption, or coincidence. But Tengen knew better. He had listened carefully to the pattern of fear in the messenger's voice, to the broken rhythm of unease in the report. The melody was all too familiar. Demons. He gathered his wives in the soft lamplight of their shared room. The three kunoichi sat close, each one alert, their expressions composed but brimming with anticipation. The mission was delicate: infiltration, observation, and extermination. It would demand stealth, speed, and trust. Hinatsuru poured tea quietly, her calm composure grounding the group. Makio leaned forward with restless energy, ready for battle, while Suma fidgeted nervously, her heart too open for the dangerous world she moved through. Tengen looked at them, a rare seriousness softening his tone. "We're heading into the heart of deceit," he said, his deep voice low and steady. "But remember this: no mission, no demon, no glory is worth your lives. If anything goes wrong, retreat. I'll handle the rest." They nodded. They had heard these words before, yet they knew he meant them every time. For all his flamboyance, Tengen was not reckless with the people he loved. He knew that beauty and life were fragile, things to be preserved at any cost. When they arrived at the entertainment district, it was another world entirely. Lanterns glowed in every color imaginable, painting the night in gold and crimson. Music and laughter spilled from every street, mingling with the scent of perfume and incense. Beneath the shimmering allure, the district pulsed with secrets. It was a world built on illusion, one that thrived on appearances, a perfect hunting ground for a demon. Tengen and his wives separated upon arrival, each taking cover under a different identity. They blended into the flow of people effortlessly, using the chaos of the city to their advantage. Hinatsuru worked within a tea house, gathering quiet whispers from passing guests. Makio disguised herself as a house attendant, bold and direct in her search for clues. Suma, nervous but determined, slipped through the narrow alleys, listening for anything that didn't belong. And Tengen, loud, confident, and unmissable, moved among the upper echelons, his presence like a burst of light in the shadows. Days turned into weeks as they investigated. Every night, the rhythm of the city played on. Laughter, footsteps, and the faint notes of shamisen strings drifting through the air. But within that music, Tengen could sense something discordant. A low vibration beneath the surface, a pulse too slow, too cold. The sound of a predator lurking beneath silk and smiles. One night, standing atop a rooftop, he closed his eyes and focused. The city below became a symphony. He filtered through the sounds, laughter, wind, movement, until he found it. A faint, unnatural frequency echoing through the heart of the district. It was the heartbeat of something ancient and hungry. He opened his eyes, his expression hardening. "Found you," he whispered. But before he could act, a new sound joined the night, the faint tremor of something breaking. His connection to one of his wives had faltered. It was Makio. Her rhythmic signal, a coded pattern they used to communicate, had gone silent. For an instant, all the flamboyant composure melted away, replaced by sheer focus. He leapt into the shadows, moving faster than the eye could follow, his body in perfect sync with the rhythm of urgency. The streets blurred beneath him as he dashed across rooftops, his blades shimmering under the moonlight. He moved like a pulse through the city's veins, following the faint traces of energy left behind. When he finally found the room Makio had been investigating, the door was torn apart, the scent of demon thick in the air. Broken furniture, overturned screens, and a single smear of blood marked the scene. Tengen's hand tightened around his blade. His heartbeat slowed, measured, controlled. The flamboyant smile was gone now. In its place was the cold precision of a shinobi. "You've made this personal," he muttered. That night, he scoured the rooftops and alleys with relentless determination. His breathing became rhythmic, each inhale and exhale syncing with his heartbeat. He activated his sound breathing once more, sending waves of sensory awareness through the city. The echoes painted a map in his mind: heartbeats, whispers, steps, and silence. And in that silence, deep underground, he heard her. Makio's faint pulse, still alive. A small smile returned to his lips, sharp and confident. "Good," he said softly. "Stay alive a little longer." The hunt was on. He moved like music given form, fluid, graceful, unstoppable. The people of the entertainment district would remember that night not as the night of fear, but the night of thunderous echoes, when shadows danced across the rooftops, and a man with twin blades cut through the darkness like a living rhythm. Somewhere below, hidden in the depths of luxury and sin, a demon stirred, one with beauty that rivaled the moon and cruelty that drowned it. Daki, the sixth upper moon. And as the first whisper of her name reached his ears, Tengen Uzui smiled again. "Flamboyant enough," he said quietly, his blades glinting. "Let's make some noise." The entertainment district glowed that night like a dream that refused to fade. Lanterns burned bright along the rooftops, their reflections shimmering across the polished tiles and narrow canals. But within that light, something darker stirred, a quiet, ominous pulse beneath the rhythm of laughter. Tengen Uzui crouched on the edge of a rooftop, listening. His senses extended outward, capturing the faintest vibrations that rippled through the air. The sound of movement below, too swift to be human. The echo of silk brushing against stone. The cold, deliberate heartbeat of a demon. He found her. With a single step, he vanished into the wind, his twin blades singing as they sliced through the silence. He landed in a narrow alley lit only by a few dim lamps, and there she stood, Daki, the upper moon 6, her beauty as haunting as her malice. Her hair glistened under the moonlight, and her kimono shimmered with elegance. But behind that beauty was something monstrous, her eyes sharp and gleaming with hunger. The air trembled around her. "You're flashy," she said softly, her voice carrying a dangerous sweetness. "Almost too flashy for a human." Tengen smirked, resting one blade over his shoulder. "Flashy is the point," sweetheart," he replied, his tone light, but his eyes serious. "And you're about to see how blinding I can get." Their movements were instantaneous. Daki's sashes erupted like whips, slicing through the air with lethal precision. Tengen moved in rhythm, dodging each strike as though he were dancing through a storm. His blades collided with the ribbons in a shower of sparks, the clang of metal and fabric merging into one chaotic symphony. Every motion he made was deliberate, swift, fluid, and flamboyant. The chain connecting his swords rang like a bell as he spun them in wide arcs, redirecting Daki's attacks. Each sound echoed differently. The rhythm told him everything: her speed, her breathing, the angle of her strikes. He listened closely, predicting her movements before they came. Still, her power was immense. She struck with the elegance of an artist and the cruelty of a predator. Every blow sent shockwaves down the narrow street, splintering wood and shattering walls. Hinatsuru, hidden on a nearby rooftop, fired a volley of kunai tipped with wisteria extract, forcing Daki to retreat momentarily. Makio and Suma rushed to join the fray, their movements perfectly in sync with Tengen's commands. They had trained for this, a coordinated strike, beautiful and deadly. "Focus on rhythm," Tengen called out, his voice sharp. "Keep the tempo steady." The three kunoichi followed his words without hesitation. Hinatsuru provided ranged cover. Makio engaged at close range with daggers, and Suma used her agility to distract Daki, weaving in and out of the demon's reach. It was like a concert, each fighter playing a part in the larger melody of battle. But Daki wasn't fighting alone. Deep within the shadows, something stirred. A second presence. Tengen felt it before he saw it, a heavier, darker rhythm beneath Daki's sharp melody. A second heartbeat. When the ground beneath them cracked open, a tall, grotesque figure emerged. Gyutaro, her brother. His skin was pale, his body emaciated, yet his movements were impossibly fast. The air grew colder, and the stench of blood filled the night. "So you've been dancing with my sister," Gyutaro hissed, his voice low and venomous. "Let's see how long you last." Tengen's eyes flickered between them, his expression unreadable. "Two demons," he murmured. "Now that's flamboyant." The battle escalated into chaos. Daki's sashes sliced through the streets, while Gyutaro's sickles spun with deadly precision, their poison glinting under the lanterns. Tengen blocked one blade with both of his, the force sending tremors up his arms. He countered with a spin, chaining his swords together and using the momentum to deflect Daki's ribbons while lunging toward her brother. Sparks filled the air, and for a moment it looked as though the entire district had turned into a storm of fire and sound. Tengen's sound. Breathing technique pulsed through his veins. He broke down the battle into its musical components, every heartbeat, every breath, every clash of steel. He could hear it all, the symphony of life and death playing around him. He moved to its rhythm, never out of tune. But for every strike he landed, Gyutaro and Daki responded in perfect unison, their bond deep and instinctive. They were two halves of one whole, moving with an eerie, synchronized grace. Makio and Suma were thrown back by a wave of force as Gyutaro's sickles sliced through the air. Hinatsuru fired again from above, her aim true, but the demon siblings adapted quickly. Their combined attacks were relentless, overwhelming. The ground shattered beneath them, buildings collapsed, and the once lively streets of the entertainment district turned into ruins. Still, Tengen didn't falter. His body moved on instinct, his heart pounding in rhythm with his breathing. Even as poison from Gyutaro's sickles grazed his skin, he refused to slow down. His movements became sharper, faster, each strike deliberate, each counter perfectly timed. He knew his strength wouldn't last forever, but he had something they didn't: sound. He listened to the battle as if it were music, searching for the one discordant note, the weakness hidden between their attacks. Then he found it. A tiny pause, a half-beat delay, when Daki's ribbons synchronized with her brother's movements. It was minuscule, invisible to the eye, but deafening to Tengen's ears. That was his opening. "Found your rhythm," he whispered, his grin returning. "Now it's time to end your performance." With renewed energy, he launched forward, his blades spinning in a dazzling arc. The clash was explosive, the sound reverberating through the district like thunder. Even as pain coursed through his poisoned veins, he refused to fall. His wives regrouped behind him, lending support, their determination unshaken. Together, they turned the battle into a dazzling display of motion and sound, the perfect, tragic harmony of warriors who refused to yield. As the dust settled for a moment, Daki screamed in rage, her ribbons recoiling violently. Tengen stood amidst the chaos, blood running down his arm, breathing heavy but steady. His golden eyes gleamed beneath the moonlight. "You two are strong," he said softly, almost respectfully. "But beauty without heart is nothing but noise." The air trembled once more as the fight reached its crescendo. And deep within the ruins of the glowing city, the sound of battle played on, fierce, beautiful, and fleeting, like the final movement of a dying song. When the night finally descended upon the entertainment district, it shimmered with a deceptive calm. Lanterns glowed softly over the winding streets. Laughter echoed from the distant houses of pleasure, and the scent of perfume hung heavy in the air. But beneath that beauty, something sinister stirred, a predator cloaked in elegance. For Tengen Uzui, the district was both a stage and a battlefield. And tonight, his performance would demand everything. He moved silently across the rooftops, his eyes scanning every shadow, every flicker of movement. The mission had begun in secrecy, yet he had chosen 3 unlikely allies: Tanjiro, Zenitsu, and Inosuke. Boys who lacked refinement, but possessed a raw, unshakable spirit that reminded him of himself long ago. Each of them had gone undercover, blending into the vibrant chaos of the courtesan houses. It was an absurd plan on the surface, and yet Tengen's intuition told him it would work. He trusted their instincts, especially Tanjiro's. And as he leapt across the roofs, the wind catching his silver hair, Tengen smiled faintly. "Flashy plans for flashy results," he whispered. But deep down, he knew this was not a mission for glory. It was one for redemption. For weeks, Tengen had been haunted by silence. His 3 wives, Suma, Makio, and Hinatsuru, had vanished within this district. They were trained kunoichi, strong and cunning. But when communication ceased, fear began to creep in. And Tengen, though flamboyant and proud, carried that fear in secret. Losing them would mean losing the last fragments of his soul that still burned with purpose. So he masked that pain behind his usual bravado, his confident grin. He laughed louder, moved faster, and sparkled brighter, but every step was fueled by quiet desperation. Then, the first sign of the demon appeared. A faint tremor in the air. A single, shrill scream swallowed by silence. The boys converged toward the sound, and Tengen's instincts ignited. The demon they sought, Daki, one of the upper 6, revealed herself not as a monster lurking in darkness, but as a stunning woman whose beauty was as cruel as her power. Her sash slithered like a serpent, slicing through walls, floors, and lives without hesitation. In that moment, the air of the district changed. The laughter faded. The music died. Tengen descended into the chaos, his blades singing like thunder. Every movement was precise, rhythmic, an art form crafted through years of battle. His twin Nichiren blades glowed golden under the lantern light, each strike exploding with sound and sparks. "Flashy, yet efficient," he murmured, twisting through the ribbons of her sash. The fight became a dance, the sound of clashing metal echoing through the night like the beat of war drums. But even as he fought, his mind raced, not just toward victory, but toward the lives still at stake. Somewhere beneath the rubble, his wives were alive. He had to believe it. And when Makio's voice finally reached him through the smoke, fierce and determined, his resolve hardened. They were bruised, battered, but unbroken. The reunion was brief, marked by hurried smiles and quicker words. They joined the fray, moving as one, fluid, practiced, unstoppable. Still, something felt off. The rhythm of the battle was wrong. Daki was powerful, yes, but not powerful enough. Her attacks lacked the true weight of an upper rank. It was then that the truth revealed itself, cruel and sudden. She wasn't alone. From the depths of the shadows surged her brother, Gyutaro, his body twisted, his grin malicious. His presence shifted the entire atmosphere. Poison dripped from his words as much as from his blades. "You flashy types disgust me," he hissed. Tengen met his gaze, tightening his grip on his swords. The real battle had begun. The sound of Gyutaro's sickles cutting through the air merged with Tengen's rhythmic breathing, forming a violent symphony. Sparks flew, poison splattered, and the ground trembled. Every blow carried intent, Gyutaro's envy and bitterness clashing against Tengen's pride and love. He fought with all the grace of a shinobi and all the might of a Hashira. But the poison began to seep into his veins. His body slowed, his vision blurred. Yet, even as death clawed near, he refused to yield. "I won't let this end here," he growled through clenched teeth. "Not while they're watching." He pushed forward, reading every motion like a beat in a song, countering, deflecting, striking, each movement flowing like music. Tanjiro and the others joined him, their determination burning bright beside his fading light. Together, they turned despair into hope. The fight became not just survival, but harmony, the kind only found in shared resolve. As Tengen locked blades with Gyutaro one final time, the world around them seemed to vanish. There was only rhythm, motion, and willpower. When the dust settled, he collapsed amidst the ruins, poison coursing through his body, but a faint smile played on his lips. The sound of victory was quiet, but it was real. The night hung heavy after the battle's explosion of color and chaos. The once vibrant entertainment district now lay in ruins, smoke rising softly into the starless sky, the faint scent of blood mingling with the perfume that lingered in the air. Broken lanterns flickered across the shattered streets, painting everything in fading gold. Tengen Uzui sat amid the wreckage, his breathing shallow, but steady, his eyes half-lidded with exhaustion. The poison had dulled his senses, yet his heart still beat with that same unyielding rhythm, the rhythm of survival. Tanjiro crouched beside him, trembling, covered in dust and ash, his sword still warm in his hands. They had done it. Somehow, impossibly, they had slain the upper six. Daki and Gyutaro, siblings bound by hatred and pain, were gone. And yet, even in victory, there was no cheer. There was only silence, the kind that follows great sacrifice. Tengen looked at the boy with quiet admiration. "You've got guts," he murmured, his voice rough, yet strangely light. "You and your flashy friends. I'll give you that." He tried to smile, but it hurt. Every breath burned. His hand trembled as he pressed it against his chest, feeling the pulse weaken. The poison from Gyutaro's blades had spread deep, a cruel toxin meant not to kill quickly, but to make every heartbeat feel like a countdown. His wives surrounded him now, their faces streaked with dirt and tears, but their eyes shone with fierce love. Suma clung to him, crying openly. Makio tried to scold her, though her voice wavered. Hinatsuru knelt quietly, preparing medicine, her hands steady despite the despair clouding her gaze. "I told you," Tengen whispered, his voice fading between breaths. "I'm not dying here. Not while you three still need someone flashy to yell at." His words earned a soft laugh, but even that sound carried sadness. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, soft and pale, touching the destruction like a gentle farewell. For a brief moment, it almost looked peaceful. The district, though broken, glowed with the promise of a new day, one paid for with courage and pain. When the Kakushi arrived to tend to the wounded, Tengen could barely move. His vision swam, and his mind drifted between dreams and reality. In one fleeting image, he saw himself as a boy again, training under the cold eyes of his shinobi father. He remembered the blood, the fear, the endless competition that had stripped him of everything human. "Survive," his father had said, "or be forgotten." But Tengen had chosen a different path. He had refused to let his life be defined by death. He had chosen color, sound, and beauty, the things his clan had long abandoned. He had chosen to live loudly, to love freely, to laugh without restraint. And now, as the poison gnawed at him, he realized how much that choice had shaped him. Even in this broken body, he felt no regret. He turned his gaze toward Tanjiro, who stood quietly nearby, exhaustion painted across his face. The boy's presence reminded him of something, of light, of the kind of heart that changes people. "Tanjiro," Tengen said, his voice low but firm. "Promise me. You'll keep going. You're the type who'll outshine all of us. Don't ever stop being that way." Tanjiro's eyes widened, and he nodded solemnly. "I will. I promise." For a while, there was nothing but the quiet hum of morning, the distant sound of water dripping through ruins, the soft weeping of survivors. Then, out of the calm, came a voice, familiar yet unwelcome, the crow of the demon slayer. Core messenger, announcing victory. Upper Rank 6 had been defeated for the first time in over a century. The message carried across the course like thunder. Even the Hashira, who were miles away, felt the tremor of that achievement. It was a turning point, one that proved demons could be beaten. That hope still had power. But for Tengen, the victory came with a price. When the medics examined him, their faces darkened. He had lost an arm, an eye, and his body was too frail to fight again. He would live, they said, but never as a Hashira. When they told him this, Tengen only chuckled softly. "Guess I'll have to retire in style," he said. His wives looked at him with a mix of relief and heartbreak. To them, it didn't matter if he never fought again. He was alive. That was enough. As the group prepared to leave the district behind, Tengen stood slowly, leaning on his wives for support. He looked back one last time at the ruins, the smoke curling like ghosts into the brightening sky. "Flashy enough ending for me," he said under his breath, though the sorrow in his eyes betrayed the humor in his tone. He had given everything, his strength, his pride, his title. But what he gained was far greater. He had seen true bravery, not the kind that came from skill or power, but from love, from selflessness, from the will to protect others, no matter the cost. And so, as they began the long journey home, the first true rays of sunlight warmed his skin. He could feel his heart beating slowly, peacefully, to the rhythm of the morning. The sound of it was quiet, but steady. The sound of a man who had lived a life worth remembering. The road home was quiet. For the first time in what felt like years, there were no footsteps rushing toward battle, no distant cries of demons, no sound of blades slicing through the dark. Only the soft rhythm of the wind, brushing against the trees, and the low hum of cicadas that sang like a gentle lullaby. Tengen Uzui walked slowly along the dirt path, his body still weak, each step a reminder of what he had endured. His wives flanked him, Makio supporting his left side, Suma clutching his arm, and Hinatsuru walking just ahead, her eyes always scanning the way forward. They were together again, and that was enough. The sun was high now, spilling golden light over the mountain road. It shimmered against Tengen's remaining eye, catching the faint reflection of his former brilliance. He had always lived for the spectacle, the noise, the color, the flare of every moment. But now he found a strange peace in silence. Every breath he took was slower, calmer. Every sound felt sacred. He could hear the crunch of gravel underfoot, the rustle of leaves above. Life, in its simplicity, had never sounded more beautiful. When they finally reached the butterfly mansion, the familiar faces of the Demon Slayer Corps awaited them. Shinobu greeted them with her usual calm smile, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of concern as she saw the state he was in. "You look terrible," she said lightly, though her tone was gentle. "Terrible? No, I look flashy," Tengen replied, forcing a grin. "One arm, one eye. That's called symmetry, Shinobu. Very fashionable." Even she couldn't help but smile. "You're lucky to be alive." "Luck?" he said with a faint laugh. "No, just good rhythm." He spent the following weeks recovering under their care, the poison slowly leaving his body, his muscles healing, though his strength never fully returned. There were nights when he woke in a sweat, hearing echoes of Gyutaro's laughter, seeing flashes of that final battle. But whenever the darkness threatened to swallow him, a soft hand would always reach for his. Suma would whisper that everything was fine. Makio would scold him for not sleeping. Hinatsuru would hum him back to calm. He had fought his last fight. Deep down, he knew it. His era as a Hashira had ended on that blood-soaked night in the entertainment district. And yet, as he sat beneath the blooming wisteria trees, watching the petals drift lazily in the breeze, he felt no sorrow. There was a certain grace in knowing when to stop, when to let the next generation take the stage. Sometimes Tanjiro would visit, his bandaged hands clutching small gifts or sweets he'd brought along. He'd sit beside Tengen, still humble, still carrying that quiet determination that burned brighter than the sun. They would talk about the mission, about what came next, about the future of the Demon Slayer Corps. And every time, Tengen would tell him the same thing. Keep your sound. Don't lose your rhythm. Even when the world falls apart around you, your heart has to stay on beat. The words stayed with Tanjiro, echoing like a lesson learned in a dream. As months passed, Tengen found new purpose in peace. He trained with his wives again, not for combat, but for balance. They learned to live without the urgency of battle. They laughed more often, cooked together, shared stories about the strange days of the past. For a man who had once lived by the blade, this quiet life was a revelation. He realized that being a shinobi, being a Hashira, those were titles. But being alive, being loved, that was the real victory. There were moments when he'd still hear the faint echoes of his old comrades, their voices carried by the wind, Rengoku's laughter, fierce and full of fire, the soft murmur of Shinobu's teasing remarks, even the solemn tone of Giyu. They were still out there, fighting, burning brightly against the endless night. And Tengen, though no longer among them, felt proud to have been part of something so grand, so alive. One evening, as the sky turned amber and purple, he stood on the veranda of the mansion, his wives beside him. The world felt endless. He took a long breath and let it go slowly. "You know," he said softly, "I used to think life needed to be loud to mean something. Explosions, colors, grand gestures. But maybe peace is the flashiest thing of all." Hinatsuru smiled. "You finally learned subtlety?" He laughed quietly. "Never. I'm just getting old." The stars began to appear, one by one, scattered across the night sky. Suma leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you think they're watching us?" she asked. "Who?" "All the others. The ones who aren't here anymore." Tengen looked up, his expression soft. "Yeah," he said after a pause. "I think they are. And I think they'd tell us to keep living beautifully." The wind carried the faint sound of a distant flute, perhaps a villager's melody, or perhaps just a trick of memory. But to Tengen, it felt familiar, comforting, like a song from another lifetime. He closed his eye, feeling the rhythm of it, slow, warm, and steady. And as the night deepened, his wives' laughter echoed beside him. The world, though scarred, was still bright. The fight he had given everything to had not been in vain. Somewhere far away, the next generation carried the flame forward, their footsteps beating in time with the sound of his heart. Tengen Uzui, the Sound Hashira, had found his peace. Not in glory or victory, but in the quiet music of life itself. The hum of the wind, the warmth of love, and the gentle sound of the world still turning.